We're going to actually learn Yud Tes Amud Beis, but I want to just go over a little from Yud Tes Amud Aleph. So,
which Masechta?
Brochos.
Can I ask
Good to see you,
about the
Isaac.
change?
Very good to see you. Welcome.
I thought that today there was supposed to be a whole hour of Tanya
Yeah, I sent everyone an email
on Sunday.
Yeah. Normally that's the way it is, but
Right.
Rabbi Dalfin decided that he thinks an hour is
I
too
didn't
long.
see one.
Oh, I sent everyone an email last night, but I don't know if everyone got it. Rabbi Dalfin felt that an hour of Tanya is a little too long. So I told him that, if you want to shorten it to a half hour. So
I'm sorry, I didn't get the email.
Okay. I told him he should shorten it, at least shorten it to a half hour, so at least we can learn Gemara for the other half hour. Otherwise, anything less than a half hour of Gemara is very hard to get ourselves into it. So from now on, he would like to do a half hour. We'll see how it goes, Okay, so we're on Yud Tes Amud Aleph, 19a, and the Gemara that we were learning, it mentioned the laws of reciting Shema while you're involved in another mitzvah. And the mitzvah that we were talking about was the mitzvah of either the eulogy or the mitzvah of the Nichum Avelim, consoling the mourners. And so there's something called the Shura that we were talking about. Shura is the row that they create after the funeral in order to console the mourners. And the question was, should the people that are creating that row, should they be reciting the Shema? Who is obligated to recite the Shema and who isn't? And which rows are exempt from the Shema, or is everyone exempt? So the Mishnah said the Shura Hapnimiyim, that Ha'oimdim b'Shura Hapnimiyim Peturin, the ones that are in the middle, in the inner row, are exempt. The Hachitzoinim Chayovin in the outer row is obligated in the Shema. So again, the Mishnah said that they already buried the deceased, Kavru Asames, and they returned. If they're able to start and finish until they reach the Shura, they should start. And if not, they should not start. And it says the ones that are standing in the Shura, Hapnimiyim are Pater, the Chitzoinim are Chayev. The Pnimiyim means the inner row is exempt, the outer row is Chayev. So the Gemara here on 19a, the bottom, it mentioned that is the idea that you should be able to start and finish the entire Shema, or is it just one pasuk or one paragraph? And the Gemara thought we have a contradiction because our Mishnah implied the entire Shema, and the Brisa implied even just one parak or one pasuk. And the Gemara concluded and said that it's not a contradiction. Really, the Mishnah also means one verse or one paragraph. If you could start and finish even one verse, or even one paragraph, or even one verse until you reach the row, then you should start. And if not, do not start. So that was the explanation of the Mishnah. So again, the Gemara explained the Mishnah that it doesn't mean finish the entire Shema. It means exactly like the Brisa said, to finish as much as you can. Now, the commentaries discuss here an interesting question. The question is, how much of the Shema is biblical? We know that we recite the entire Shema, 3 paragraphs, 245 words.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Just one second. We recite 245 words of the Shema, plus the 3 words that the Chazan repeats is 248 words, symbolic of the limbs of a person. That's the Shema. So the entire Shema is 3 paragraphs, these 245 words, and that is what the Shema consists of. However, is all of that biblical, or is some of it biblical and some of it rabbinic? Yes, Ben. Ben?
My question was, is it the line that looks in, or the second line that should finish as much as they can on the way? Which line are we talking about that has to finish one pasuk or one perek?
So the Mishnah said two things. One is the people who are heading to the line, so they didn't even arrive yet in the line, or if you want to say they arrived, but they are
Right.
So depends on which row. In other words, the inner row was exempt completely, or the inner row, if they're not, if they're not able to, they're exempt. The outer row is obligated to say the Shema, the entire Shema. So we're talking about,
Both rows, or are you talking about the outer row?
So you're wondering when it says there. In other words, there's a little contradiction here. It says on the one hand the inner row is exempt, the outer row is obligated, and it also says that if they're able to finish until they reach the row, they're obligated. If not, they're not obligated. So divide it into two things. Divide the first point of the Mishnah from the second point. First point is they're walking from the burial to the row. There we're talking about, can they finish or not? We're not dealing with the front, inner row or outer row. Then when they arrive, the inner row or the outer row carries that. Now we're dealing with the inner row or the outer row. So it's two separate categories. So
okay. So it includes both rows, that if they can finish some, they should.
So we're dealing with anyone who's coming from the funeral. They should be able to finish right. They should be able to finish. Now, the question that I was asking is, how much is biblical? Because the rabbinic laws, we often find that the rabbis can be lenient with, if need be. So again, there's biblical laws and rabbinic laws. Now, with biblical laws, the rabbis don't normally exempt someone unless the Torah itself exempts the person. The rabbinic laws, we find more leniencies that the rabbis exempted people in certain scenarios. Now, according to that, if you look at our Gemara said that they are coming from the funeral, and if they're able to finish even one verse, they should do that. So the question is, what does that sound like? How much is biblical and how much is rabbinic? According to this Gemara, it sounds like one verse is biblical and everything else is rabbinic, right? Sounds like a good proof. Because if the entire Shema was biblical, then where'd you come up with this leniency? As long as you say one verse. The rabbis aren't going to do that. They're not going to tell you, well, the Torah says you got to say the whole Shema. But you know what? If you say one verse, it's good enough. The rabbis can do that on their own obligation. They're not going to do that on the biblical obligation. They're not going to tell you, the Torah says to do this, but we are going to give you a leniency. No, it doesn't work that way. On the Torah laws is the Torah law. On the rabbinic law, when they made the decree in certain scenarios, and it could be that they were lenient in other scenarios, and that's why there's leniencies. For example, I'll give you an example. According to Torah law, you're obligated. The law is that if we're not sure about something, you're supposed to be machmir, you're supposed to be strict. Rabbinic law, if there's a question, you're not sure, you can be lenient. There's a question you're not sure about a rabbinic law, so there's leniency. For example, you're not sure if you set a bracha on a certain food item. That's a rabbinic law, and because of that, you don't have to recite another bracha because it's rabbinic. You're not sure if you benched, that's biblical. You're not sure if you benched, you got to say benching. You got to bench. You're not sure if you said Shema in the morning. You forgot. You're not sure. You fell back asleep. You're not sure if the first time you woke up, if you actually said Shema or not. You know what? You got to say Shema again. Biblical. What'd you say?
Bracha levatala, the Eraisa, the Rabbanan.
With regard to benching, you're talking about? How could you repeat benching if you're doing a bracha levatala? That's what you're asking?
Any bracha levatala.
Any bracha levatala. You want to know if it's the Eraisa or the Rabbanan?
I'm saying it's the Eraisa or the Rabbanan. Oh, that's fine.
So I believe it's a machlekes, but the halacha is that you, first of all, because a bracha is different than Shem Shamayim Levatala. Shem Shamayim Levatala is daraisa. You're not allowed to say God's name in vain. But a bracha is thanking Hashem, so it's not exactly in vain. But in any event, the point that I'm bringing out is that on a rabbinic law, the rabbi said, you know what? When it comes to our laws, if you're not sure about something, we give you the leniency. We only obligated to you in a case of positivity. If you're not 100% sure, we're lenient. But they're not going to do that to the Torah law. So from this Gemara, it sounds like it sounds like the law is that only the first verse is biblical, because the Gemara says that as long as they could just say one verse of Shema, say it. That's all you got to do. You're able to come back and say one verse. Sounds like, well, probably because one verse is the biblical law. So at least you did one verse. It's you fulfilled the biblical obligation. That's what it sounds like from the Gemara. And the truth is, there are opinions that say that one verse is biblical. The problem is that there are other opinions, and there are other opinions among the Rishonim, among the commentaries of the Gemara, that say that it's more than one verse. The first paragraph is biblical, or even the second paragraph is biblical. Now, I should mention the third paragraph of Shema is all about reciting the Exodus, mentioning the Exodus from Egypt. That is also biblical, but you don't need to say that paragraph to fulfill the biblical obligation. You could fulfill the biblical obligation even with other verses. So you can't say that the third paragraph is exactly biblical, because you could say one verse and fulfill the third paragraph. You could just mention the Exodus from Egypt. So the third paragraph is not part of this debate, but there is a debate among the commentaries about the beginning part of the Shema. How much of it is biblical? Is it the first verse? Is it the first paragraph? Is it the first two paragraphs? So according to that, what do they do with this Gemara? So the answer that I gave, I believe we mentioned this on the side. I'm just developing it a little more clear because I don't know if people caught on. The answer that I gave was that here, the way those commentaries are going to learn this Gemara is it's not about fulfilling the obligation of Shema. You're exempt. You're involved in a mitzvah of nichum avelim. You're involved in the mitzvah of consoling the mourners. You're exempt from Shema. However, the rabbis established a law that if possible, you should accept the yoke of heaven, called Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shamayim, accepting the yoke of heaven. And that's why here it says you could, as long as you say Pasuk Echad, good enough. You said one verse. That's good enough, because you are, the goal is that you're fulfilling an obligation of accepting the yoke of heaven that the rabbis placed upon you. And in this scenario, even if you're not able to say Shema, at least accept the yoke of heaven. So that's the way of understanding this Gemara, even according to the other opinions. And now comes the next Gemara. And the next Gemara that we did on Friday, we're on page 19b, the top of the page. I'm going to read it inside one more time. So, Ha'imdim Beshura, those that are standing on the row, etc. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. When it says Tanu Rabbanan, it means in a brisa or a tosefta. The rabbis learned it's not a Mishnah, but it's a source from the Tanoic scholars, from the scholars of the time of the Mishnah. So the rabbis learn Shura Haroya Pnima, a row that sees the inner area where the Avel, where the mourner is sitting, and they are able to see the area that surrounds the mourner. So they're in the inside row. Some commentaries explain that this refers to that even if they're not the inner row, the innermost row, could be it's really the inner two most rows, because even the second row can see in between the heads above the shoulders of the first row. So therefore, it really refers to the first two rows that they see the inner area, because the second row can also see. It's Petura, they are exempt from the Shema. V'she'ena raya pnima, and those that don't see the pnima, the inner row, are chayebes, they are obligated in reciting the Shema. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, haboye machmas avel peturin. Those that come because of the avel, they are the ones that are exempt. But the ones that come machmas atzmon, the ones that come for themselves just to see what's going on, they're not coming to show honor for the mourner. They're coming just for themselves. They are chayav, and they are obligated, and therefore they would have to say the Shema. So one way of learning this is that the Brisa said the inner row or inner two rows are exempt from the Shema. And when does that apply? That applies only to those that are coming for the purpose of consoling the mourner or honoring the mourner. But those that are coming for their own interest, just hanging out, seeing what's going on, the reporters from the Jewish websites or something, they are not exempt from saying the Shema. Now, the other way of reading it is that the outer rows that are officially supposed to be obligated in saying the Shema, the outer rows that don't, if they are coming because of Nichom Avelim, they are exempt also. So there's two ways of reading this. Rabbi Yehuda is either coming to explain to qualify the first row, the first point of the Brisa, or he's extending the exemption of the second point of the Brisa. And both of these ways are brought in the commentaries, that it could either be on the first row, or in other words, we are not sure what Rabbi Yehuda, the meaning of Rabbi Yehuda's statement, because there's two ways of learning it. It could either be limiting the exemption of the Brisa. And what does that mean? That even the ones in the front row are not completely exempt, only if they're coming there only to console the mourner. But if they're in the front row and they're coming there just for themselves, just to find out what's going on, or because they're news reporters or so on, they are not exempt, even if they're in the front rows. Or it could be that even in the outer rows, if a person's coming for the right purpose because he's interested in consoling the mourner, even though he's in the outer rows, he is exempt from saying the Shema. The inner rows are all exempt, maybe. Even if you're coming as a news reporter, you're exempt. The outer rows, they sometimes are exempt, sometimes are not exempt. What are these two views? What is the difference between these two views? It would seem that a point that has to be that they're dealing with is the fact that you're in the inner row. Is that desecrating the honor that the mourner deserves? Should everyone in the front two rows be exempt? Maybe because it doesn't look respectful to the mourner. Just a thought. I'm throwing a thought there. I don't know if this is correct or not. It seems to me like that might be what we're dealing with. Being in the front two rows, it's respectful for the mourner that they shouldn't be involved in reciting the Shema. So even if you're coming for the wrong purpose, different purpose, but the fact is you're in the inner two rows, and therefore you're exempt from saying the Shema. On the other hand, the fact that people on the outer rows, they're coming for the mourner, and they're there for the right purpose. So that's not about desecrating not about dishonoring the mourner. It's the fact that they're involved in a mitzvah, and therefore they are exempt. That's just a little thought. Now we started the next Gemara as well. I'm going to try to begin a few minutes. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav said,
Rabbi,
yes.
I had a question. I'm just wondering if the Gemara is indicating that the people that are in the front row that are face to face with the mourners, it's better that they should be people that are there to console the mourners as opposed to just there for curiosity. Those curiosity people should try not to be in the front row. They should give that spot to people that are there to console the mourners.
I mean, it doesn't say that clearly. It's a little hard to put that into the words of the Gemara of the Bryce. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I could really fit that in, and develop that from this from the Bryce. So maybe if I thought about it more, you know what I mean? I don't see that written clearly. I will also mention to you, there is another commentary that explains this Gemara differently. And the other commentary, the Raven, learns that the Gemara doesn't mean that they're coming. It's not about the inner row or the outer row. It's all about people who are related and people who aren't related. And that's how he translates it. You come for the Avel, meaning because of a relative, or you're coming because you are consoling the mourner. So according to that opinion, according to that way of translating the Gemara, everyone's coming for the right purpose. And it's only a difference of relatives or non-relatives. And the relatives have more of a responsibility to be there for the mourner, and they are exempt. And the outer, the people who are not there, as a relative, they are not exempt. And that's that's another way of reading the Gemara. And Rabbi Yehuda is explaining the first opinion. He's not qualifying it. He's explaining it, and that's another way of learning this Gemara. So according to that, they're all coming for the right purpose, and they're all coming. They're all there as people consoling the mourner. Yes, Ben.
Unmute I have to unmute myself. I think the people that come for themselves, not for the Avel, they don't have to be consoled, so they don't have to be in the Shura, but they can stay in the back Shura, and that shows that they are not there for the Avel, they are there for themselves. That's how I see the difference.
Okay, I think it sounds like you're trying to take David Olensky's path or something along those lines of people who are not there for the Avel should not be in the front. Is that what you're implying? Is that what you're saying?
Because
Okay, David, you got to vote. Ben agrees. Ben likes your path. Okay. Okay, it sounds interesting. I don't see if you could prove that from the Gemara, but it's I guess it's a menschlich. I guess it makes sense that it's menschlich. Yeah. Okay, Mel. Yes.
Now, I just wanted to put, in my humble opinion, seems like the Gemara likes to dissect every possible scenario. What is on people's minds when they go or they don't go, that's another thing that's also probably being discussed too. But I think the Gemara always likes to, before they come to the conclusion, before it goes into the Shulchan Aruch, what the din is about it, I think it likes to dissect it. That's the whole part of the Gemara, is to go over each and every type of aspect that could possibly happen in life. I think that's what it's all about, in my humble opinion.
You're right. That's exactly what the Gemara is doing. It's developing every option, and so that we could understand, at least bringing out the area where we could figure out what the main point is. And the term used is libun hilchasa. Libun hilchasa means that you want to be able to clarify halacha. In order to clarify halacha, you have to understand the reason behind the original halacha. So, and then you can apply it to different scenarios. But if you don't understand the reason well, then you'll never be able to apply it in today's day and age or in other scenarios where it doesn't exactly specify. So part of our study is, and the reason why the Gemara is, what the purpose of the Gemara is, it should give us an ability to try to figure out what the main reason is for each law, and then we could apply it to other scenarios. Okay, so the next Gemara said, I'm just going to read the first line. If a person sees kalayim, finds kalayim in his garment, he has to remove it, even though it's in an embarrassing place. And the reason is because this is a law, a prohibition in the Torah. Silbash shatnez, the person should not wear clothing that's wool and linen together. And if a person transgresses that, they would need to immediately remove it. And we don't take into consideration the fact that it's embarrassing. Now, what is the connection between that and our Gemara? So the connection between that and our Gemara, we'll soon see, is the fact that it seems like there are some leniencies of our Gemara with dealing with going with a mourner. And we're going to talk about a case where a mourner is going to walk on an area where it might be impure, and other people are supposed to walk with him. And we're going to see that it seems like there's leniencies because of what's called kavod habriyos, respect for other human beings. And in this scenario, it seems like we don't take that into consideration. The fact that there's a biblical law, we have an obligation to fulfill the Torah law, even in a case where it is embarrassing. And so that's where we're up to. And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll see you all continuation of this Gemara tomorrow. And
Rabbi.